Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor and subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It's always much appreciated. Today, I'm joined by my pal and the voice of the Washington Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we go over some predictions and preseason expectations or pre-training camp expectations for what we think of this team entering training camp as far as how the season might play out. Do you think Carson Wentz will throw for 30 touchdown passes? Could Antonio Gibson hit 1,200 rushing yards? Is this or could this be a top 10 defense? We go over all of that and more. And we go talk about Jahan Dotson as well. Don't forget, you can follow Bram on Twitter at RealBramW, and you can read my work on ESPN.com. Coming next week before training camp, it's less than a week away, with ESPN.com, we'll be running a preview of training camp for every NFL team, including this one. I offer a bold prediction in there. I don't know how bold it is. I hate bold predictions because every time I put one out there, people take it as a report, and it's not. So anyway, but I do think it's something that will stick out. So look for that next week. Reminder, again, training camp is less than a week away. Thank goodness. Bram and I get into all of that about, what it's like to cover a camp, what it was like before covering a camp. So, hopefully that's a fun listen for a few minutes before we get into all the pre-training camp predictions and expectations. A reminder as far as the physically unable to perform list. If you remember, guys have to be placed on that in training camp. Otherwise, they cannot be placed before training camp. Otherwise, they can't be placed on this later. So if they don't open training camp on the PUP list, they cannot open the season on the PUP list. I do expect Chase Young and Logan Thomas to open on the PUP list based on everything you've heard leading up to this point. It's clearly not official, but that is certainly the expectations. I'll be curious to see what Chase Rouillet, what happens with him as well. So, and again, as a reminder with Chase Young, I do think that it will be mid-September. Right now, it will be mid-September at the earliest before he comes back. That's my guess, and in a sense too. And with Logan Thomas, I think they'll know better in the middle of August whether or not he's trending toward that season opener or not. So let's get to my conversation with Bram Weinstein, because what you want to know about is training camp. So let's get to it. Well, Bram, it's starting up in just a few days, and I'm not, I'm not sure I'm ever fully ready, but I think I am now because I'm just kind of tired of talking about what might happen. How about you?
So nowadays I'm older. It used to take me a month to get over the season. Now it takes me 2. But at that point there's free agency in the draft and all that stuff. And so you're really still engaged. And then I start to miss it when the OTAs happen. And then when they break that and have the 6-week thing, that's when I start jonesing for it. So I can't wait. I miss it. It's, it really is a humongous part of my life. And so I totally miss it. And I can't wait. I heard your interview with Nikki earlier this week, and she was saying the same thing. I wasn't going to miss that for the world, even in all the things that, and I think all of us who kind of live it and breathe it a little bit, we all feel that way. We're so in it. Now, call me 2 weeks into camp where I go, can we get to the real games now? Because, it's the craziest part of the season is the first month of it is the grindiest part of the grind. Because
it is.
It's awesome, when you get to see everybody and they're practicing, and then that first preseason game is really cool. And then it's a month until they play a real game. And that is when it's a grind just waiting for that to actually happen.
It is. And I think I love watching the practices. You can learn so much from them.
Yeah. And
that's so to get an up close look at how, and I always go back to Terry McLaurin when we're watching, for people listening, when we're watching practice, the receiver group is very close to where we are. So you get a really good view of them every day. So I like to always videotape the receivers, and I can go back and honest to God, I go back and watch them. I slow it down frame by frame because I want to see what separates this guy from this guy. What does Terry McLaurin do that someone else doesn't do, for example? And you learn so much about them. And you can do that with other position groups too. But especially, I always use that as the main example because that's the one I think where it's closest to us, where you get the best information out of them. And the quarterbacks too, you can see how they do things. So I love that part of it. And, I think camp is so much easier than it used to be because before it was 2-a-day practices. So you're there each practice and it is a grind. I mean, it was more of a grind than it is now because now it's like it's one morning practice. They have an afternoon walkthrough. We're not there for that. Yeah. It's not that, you could go back and work. It's more normal hours, I feel like, than it used to be. Do you remember when way back when, you were gone? Sometimes you'd be working from 9 to 9 or 8 to 9 at night,
That's what it used to be. Yeah. I mean, even when I first started covering them, like late 1990s, early, like probably the year 2000 was probably my first camp. They still had 2-a-days. They were still in Carlisle. We were living in a dorm. They'd have a morning practice. They'd have an afternoon practice. It was like, and I can't imagine what the players were, felt like through all of that in the summer heat. But for me, like it was a grind to get through it. And to your point now, like they're not going away. So I'm going to go home every night and I will go back and do my radio show and be there in plenty of time. I won't even be in a rush. They're going to be done at 11 o'clock. They'll probably do some interviews. It's quite a breeze compared to what it used to be, but I miss it and I'm glad we're back at it. And the other big changes, in the off season, they don't practice in pads anymore. So I don't really think we've seen them go full speed or what they actually look like. So that's going to be interesting the first couple of weeks.
And that's the other thing that's different now. Like even because the CBA has changed things for contact and all that you used to learn so much more about more positions. There are some positions that are really hard to get a great handle on in camp. I agree. Because of the lack of it. I mean, it's funny now, Bram, because a guy collides with someone else in practice, like, ooh, and it's a big deal because there's a collision and it's physical, but it doesn't, you don't get a lot of truly physical play in practice work because you're just not allowed. So there's obviously, there's definite contact. It's just not like what it was. I mean, during Norv's practices, for example, were very physical. Gibbs, Schottenheimer was doing the 2-a-days back in the day.
Yeah.
And his were brutal because they were full pad 2-a-days.
That's right.
Both sessions. So it's not like that anymore, but you still get a lot of information out of it. And you can pick up little things about how guys interact before and after practice, staying after practice. What are they working on? With who? There's all sorts of little things that you start to learn that I love. That so back in the day when it was more of a grind, you kind of had to gear up for it. And I try to get in good shape before camp. But I get so tired. And so there was a little bit of because you knew your summer ended when camp began.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're not your life ended, but like there was like for 6 months, it's just this, period. And it's fun, but it's a grind. Yeah. Now, though, I'm so tired of the talk in the off season myself. I'm tired of myself talking that I just want to get to, let's see what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I thought I worked with Julie Donaldson. She said it, after D'Angelo decided he didn't want to return to the booth and we were going to look for, a replacement for him in the booth this year. She said, and I agree with her, she was like, the person we need to find, obviously the fans got to take to him and they've got to be really good at this. They got to be locked in and, been following the league and the team and all that stuff, but they also have to understand that you're married to it.
Yeah.
And you are. And starting next Wednesday, I'm more married to that than anything else in my life for 6 months. But you know what? I love it. It's
a good marriage for me, man. It's been a great marriage for me. So I'm happy.
Yeah.
Anyways, people don't want to hear about that. Let's get I wanted to talk about maybe some either preseason predictions or expectations for various players or units or whatever, just kind of how we see things entering camp. And let's start with Carson Wentz. Since he's going to be the number one guy to watch this camp for them and how he progresses. What are your expectations? You watched a lot of him in the offseason, and I spent this week watching a lot of his stuff. What are your expectations of him before we see him in camp? What are your expectations for him this season?
So I'm really interested to see how much they play him in the preseason games. he's extremely experienced. It's also a new team. There's also a lot of new parts. There's a prominent rookie that's going to be part of their offense. The offensive line's got a lot of new parts. Like, I feel like there's a case for he should play a decent amount of maybe a couple of the 3 games, but I don't know if that's what's going to happen. So until Rivera tells me that, it's hard to know.
Right.
I'm really dying to see him in pads and full speed. And where I'm really interested in seeing him mainly in the preseason is, as you alluded to, that you watched him, and I did too. I have some pretty interesting, or concerns about his ball security, decision-making on slow developing plays. He's got an incredible arm, but the idea that he's extremely accurate with it down the field, which I know the team is hoping he'll, open up that offensive part for them. I want to see that live. So right. I think it's really hard for me to make a prediction about him other than to say, like, I know what I remember when he was at the height of his, career in Philadelphia. And if he's going to revert back to that, this team is going to be exponentially better than they've been, because they also have, in my opinion, the best collection of skill position people they've had in some time. Well, versatile. A lot of versatility, a lot of speed. So hopefully a lot of options. But, if you go off of what you saw in Indianapolis and then in Philadelphia the year before, I think you should have reservations about what you should expect. So it's hard for me to answer this question other than to say, I think he's a really big talent. I think he offers a tremendous amount of potential for them, but I do want to see, is he going to erase a number of the decisions that hurt him in games over the last couple of years? And that's probably partially on Scott Turner and the offense to construct something that he's comfortable in and gets his confidence back.
Well, so his career high for touchdown passes is 33. His last 2 full years as starter, he's gone 27-7. The Eagles and then the Colts, obviously. He's thrown for more than 4,000 yards once. Do you think he'll get to 30 touchdowns?
I have to look up the records. I don't think any Washington quarterback's done that since Sonny. I got to look it up, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I don't believe that any of them have gotten to 30 since Sonny. Yeah. So that would be a big number for this franchise. Yes. Will he get to 30? That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I just don't even know how to answer it, because at this juncture, having not seen him play or really practice at full speed, it's all just kind of hope and optimism that he is going to settle back into the player that he was before he started having injuries in Philadelphia.
By the way, nobody since Sonny had 31 and 67. Nobody.
Right. So I
league now, but even
I can't believe I remember this. But yes, no one since Sonny was 30. I mean, it's unbelievable to think about, but it's true.
Yeah. So, and when I look at him, my thought is, first of all, he showed. I was talking to Logan Paulson about this, and I kind of think that Carson Wentz is a bit of a Rorschach test, and how you judge him before you watch some of these games, you're going to pick out different things. So when you see him, you definitely see some of, like, my problem with some of the accuracy stuff was on failing to get some yak after some of these throws. Like, there, you might be a little bit high here, and this guy's got to reach back here, so he can't turn into more yards after the catch, etc. And that was something that jumped out. I also think that he has much better skill talent this year than he had last year for the depth of it. And I think he has guys who play bigger. I like Michael Pittman, but Terry McLaurin is just a lot better. And I think Jahan Dotson ultimately will be better than Michael Pittman. And beyond Pittman as a receiving core, there's nothing that I'd say, I'd rather have this guy than than anybody here. So I think that's going to help him. And I do think that arm strength, and you see it, will help. Again, I go back to the yak, because I saw it, and there are times he made some throws with that I just, like, nobody's made that throw here in years, maybe ever, under duress against the Rams. Aaron Donald bearing down at him, backing up, 42-yard pass to Pittman on 3rd and 14. Let him down the field, open area. Another time he hits Mo Alley Cox off a play action, doesn't have to move his feet. He's quick fake for the play action. And instead of moving his feet, which other guys may have to do to get more into it, he was able to just turn and whip it to Mo Alley Cox. Because he got it there so fast, it gave his tight end a chance he gained 8 yards after the catch. If it takes a little bit longer, he's tackled right away. So that arm strength is going to help. But I also wonder about the accuracy. But with the skill talent around him, the chance for him getting 30, I think, is higher.
Yeah, I think so. And I'll say this too about what really impresses me about him outside of he clearly isn't a high level athlete. He's not fast, but he can move, right? It's a little awkward the way he runs. And he's a little loose with the ball. So that I hope that they can correct that. I hope he can kind of correct that, but he can move. He's not scared, right? To your point about he'll work under pressure. He doesn't just take a sack. He'll try to get out of it. Might be a fault of his at times that he maybe does a little too much of that. That's fine. If you want to make that an argument, but here's where he's excellent. On play action fakes, excellent.
Yeah.
In misdirection plays that are called at the line, excellent. Things in the 5 to 15 yard range where the ball, where it's going to be placed is pretty much determined pre-snap. So it's like a 3-step excellent, high level elite talent stuff that I think on its face makes them better immediately.
Yes, absolutely.
What ends up worrying me is ball security at times, decision-making on plays that break down, it becomes backyard football, and he's a little too Mahomes for my taste, where he's taking some chances that I don't think need to be taken. And on slow developing plays, there are these moments where you're holding your breath with him. But that's recent past. That's not the future. And that's why I kind of lean back into settling into this. He's a high-level talent. He's a higher level talent they've had in a long time here. He does open the door for a lot more options, I think, offensively for them. Definitely. And considering the skill set that they have and the speed that they have, there should be some really good matchups for them week to week to week. So I see all of that there. My gut says take it slow, build his confidence up, put him in positions to make quick decisions where he is excellent, and hopefully have some success and build on it. Because I think he needs, more than anything, to me, the storyline is, whether he'll say it or not, and he won't say it, I think they need to build his confidence back up to be an elite quarterback, not just a good one, because things have not gone well the last couple of years for him. And so I think his confidence, to me, is issue one of the season, and I'll be interested to see how he handles the preseason, and I'll be interested to see how he handles whenever the first setback is.
Right. And I think that's to me, that's always the big thing, is how do you respond to those setbacks? And I think that's something that has tripped him up at times in the past. I think the other thing here is provide him with answers, right? And so, I didn't always see that in Indianapolis, that there were too many times that I'm watching where he hits his plant step and there's some pressure already coming on him, and there's really nothing to help him.
Yep.
As far as getting the ball. And so
I agree. To be fair to him, I agree with you.
So with this team, I think with J.D. McKissick, with with Logan Thomas, when he gets back, I think you're going to have some more of those. He has more options here to get rid of the ball. I think you also going to have more guys who can win them one-on-one matchups here compared to what he had. And I think that's going to be a big deal. So I think there's, the funny thing is with Carson, I want to move on after this. The thing with him is, I think it's not so much is he an upgrade, it's going to be what level can he get back to.
Agreed.
More so than anything else. Like, he's a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL. He's put up really good numbers. He's just probably he might be as analyzed as any quarterback has been the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I guess, any quarterback these days is probably overanalyzed, but certainly he has been. And so really it's about what level can he get back to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on, to be fair to him last year. One, he's on a new team again. Two, people forget this part. He suffered a foot injury early that some people thought might ruin his season. He played through it, right? And third, Quentin Nelson wasn't playing early for them. Their offensive line early in the season was atrocious. So on some of the early losses, I don't put it on him at all. In fact, I was watching those go, and this guy had no help. And I also agree with you that, Jonathan Taylor's amazing. But on the whole, their skill set people, I'll take this group over that skill set people outside of the running back any day of the week. And I do think that's going to help them. So the other big open question really is, is this O-line going to protect him well? And I think that's an open question here.
So what's your, and will this be a good line? Because you lost Sheriff, you cut Eric Flowers. Is this line Is that a concern for you going into camp?
I don't think on paper they're better. I mean, I don't know how you make a case that they're better. They're not. Cosme coming back and hopefully being healthy now in a second year. Hopefully he settles into becoming a productive right tackle. There's no chance they're better at right guard. I mean, he's an all-world player that's not there, right? But I do think that they have options there with the veterans they brought in and potentially Schweitzer if he's not the center early because of an injury to Roulier. And listen, I like Charles Leonard. They all do, but like he's not paid like a top tackle because he's not. So This is an interesting group. I will lean back on, and I think this is fair. And especially after last year with all of the injuries on the offensive line where they're down to a fourth center and all that stuff. Clearly Matsko knows what he's doing. And if there's anyone who's going to, turn what is, on paper looks to be like a run of the mill offensive line into one that works, I will believe it's him because he's proven it 2 years in a row. And so I hope that that's the case, but this does feel like when they do spend some money next offseason, it may go back into the offensive line for sure.
I think or money or draft capital, the higher draft capital with that, especially in the interior. And I'm a big Schweitzer guy as a run blocker, as a pass protection, but I still like their depth. I think a guy that really needs to show more is Sadiq Charles.
Agreed.
And if they can, because he's got the ability, if he could become a starter, to be a quality starter, but he's got to stay healthy and he's got to show it. But I like their depth. Yeah, with you, to me, I wouldn't call it a concern, but I think there's a question with them going into camp, and I agree. They've got to show more. Is this will this be a top 10 D, do you think?
I think they have a really good shot at it. In the same way that last year at this time, my feeling was there's no chance they'll be ranked as high as they were in 2020, but they might be as effective because of the schedule they're playing and the quarterbacks that they're playing. I would, say this time around, I look at their schedule. It's not nearly as formidable, or doesn't feel that way for sure. And so, I'd say why not? Mainly because your opposition does matter when you talk about this. Are they going to be a top 5 defense, like a legitimate top 5 defense? Tell me how Cole Holcomb plays in the middle, and let me know if the corners hold up, as constructed, and do they get the output that they're looking for from the safety position? If all of those questions get answered in the positive, then I think they are definitively a top 10 defense and maybe higher. And if there are some weaknesses, as I think you and I probably agree there likely is at some of these positions, then they might be top 10 based on some of the opposition that they're playing.
Right. And my concern is the back seven, the depth at corner, big time questions there. And I think with Cole Holcomb, I think he can be a good linebacker. Can he be the linebacker they need? And the linebacker they need is a guy who can not only make the adjustments, relay that to Jamin Davis, and then boom, you're in position to make the play. The guy that you're going to be broadcasting with, London Fletcher, was phenomenal with that. He could make the call and then go react right now. It's, can you make the call? Can you say, hey, Jamin, there's a motion, you got C-gap, whatever. And then boom, ball snapped, you're going right where you need to go. Or are you pausing to get there? So you need that. That's what he has to be effective in this defense. And for this defense to get to a top 5 level, because they need someone that, Jamin's going to he's going to need that guy there with him. And if he can get that, then maybe you get the max out of Jamin Davis too. What about for Chase Young and Montez Sweat? Do you think Chase will have a bounce back year?
Well, I need to hear Ron Rivera tell me on day 1 of camp when he expects him to practice again. So I think that's number one. I don't know, right now, but my gut tells me he's not playing week 1, but
my guess is it'll be mid-September at the earliest.
That's what I think. My gut says hopefully week 2 or 3, how they place him, like if he's on a PUP list or whatever it is early, will give you a hint of what they're thinking about his recovery. I don't think it's a guarantee he plays week 1. So I think it's very hard to put any kind of prediction on him until we see him, talk to him, hear from the trainers or Rivera or whoever's going to speak to us about it, and get a real sense about when he's coming back. But I'd love to see him play Jacksonville. I just have a hard time feeling like that's going to happen. And
but he will be back at some point.
He will be, and it sounds like early in the season. It sounds like early.
And like I said, my sense would be mid-September or at the earliest. But when he gets back, he's going to be coming back at some point at full strength. Do you expect to see the guy that we thought we were going to see last year?
I hate to put pressure on him because he's coming off something serious physically. And so I want to be fair to him.
Okay.
That I think like,
so
let's give him, let me see what he looks like physically, before I really put that on him.
Well, he's always going to look good physically, just coming off the bus.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because for me, it's as much a mental thing for him as it is physical.
I agree. From that perspective, I do think, and I will, hear Rivera out, that they've had a heart-to-heart, and
they've had a
few of them, and that he is more buying into the concepts the team is pushing on him than the ones that he has been following from outside influences. I do believe the guy wants to win. I do believe he's a really hard worker. I do believe he likes playing here. I do believe he wants to be good. So all of those things like add up to, when it clicks that they're on the same page, that we'll be fine. He's an elite level athlete. I just want to be careful putting any pressure on somebody coming off the type of injury he had. And now knowing that both knees were involved in the, reconstruction of everything, I just don't want to put, he's back and now he's going to have a 3-sack game. I don't think that's fair to him. So I want to just be careful with that.
I agree with you. So I'm only going to say 20 sacks in 10 games. No, I'm not going to go crazy on that. I do think, because like I said, I think for him, if we see early on, the approach he's taking will tell us a lot.
I agree.
It may not result in big plays early on, but if the approach is the right way, you're going to see it in the second half of that year.
Yep.
And so like that to me is what will be very telling with him. What about Montez Sweat? Is double-digit sacks for him finally?
Yes. I think that, I don't think he's going to have much of an excuse. He's going to be, if this plays out the way we think it's going to play out, they're going to be relying on him to be the playmaker off the edge until Chase Young is healthy again to either play or contribute to the level that they expect him to play. I mean, would you be shocked even when Chase comes back that they put him on a pitch count? They don't put him out there, for a full, amount of snaps. I don't know how they're going to handle that. We'll have to wait and see. With Montez, this is year 4 of the 5-year deal. Next year's the year he's supposed to get an extension. This is a career year for him.
It's a big year for him.
It's a big year for him. And honestly, off of last year, where yes, he got injured, but not unlike Chase Young, was not performing to the degree that they expected him, especially early in the season, with some of the similar criticisms that Chase was receiving, but Chase gets more headlines for those criticisms. I think this is a major, you need to lock in and have a huge bounce back year and show us why we're going to pay you what top tier edge rushers get. And so I think this is a massive year for him. It's a massive year for Holcomb. But so from that perspective and from a motivation perspective, I expect Montez Sweat to have an enormous year, short of injury. But if he doesn't, I think it's very telling if he doesn't.
There were a few games last year where I thought he had some really good rushes. They didn't result in sacks, but they were really good rushes. And again, if you have really good rushes consistently, you will do really well eventually. And I think, so that's why I'm still on the Montez Sweat bandwagon as far as still thinking that he can break out at some point. Now, what does that breakout mean? Is it double digits? Could he get to 12 to 15? I don't know if he can I don't know that he'll get there. I do like how he and John Allen work together. The one thing that I hope they continue to do this year, and this is where, last year, early in the year, first of all, I hope the coaching staff does a better job in those first 4 games than they've done the first couple of years. And that's in terms of using guys, et cetera. So that's one thing. But as far as the defense goes last year, early on, they were relying on that 4-man rush, especially on third downs with Young and Sweat. They figured those 4 guys, they can get home. The coverage behind them was bad. They weren't getting home because the ball was getting out. But even when the ball wasn't getting out, they weren't getting enough pressure. And then when Sweat and Young were hurt and Smith-Williams and Tuhill go in, they started sending more blitzes on third downs, and it was more effective. So I'd like to see that continue to watch Dallas, what they were doing with Micah Parsons and Gregory and Lawrence. They were moving guys around and being aggressive despite having that kind of pass rush talent. And I'd like to see that continue here on third downs, to put Sweat and then Young, when he gets back, into prime spots to make some of those big plays. That's what I want to see.
I honestly believe, like, just watching defense around the league, that you kind of have no choice but to force the issue. The rules are so like rigged in the favor of the offensive players. You can't touch receivers anymore. Like, you've got to force the issue. If you allow any quarterback of any merit to stand back in a pocket, they're going to kill you. So, and I think there's a preponderance of very good wide receiver talent out there in the league right now. To me, it makes no sense not to be hyper aggressive, even if you do have a lot of money and assets invested in this defensive line. So I agree with you. I'm hoping to see a more aggressive Jack Del Rio unit this year.
Yeah, consistently. I think, I really, because I think that'll make a difference. The pass rush did a nice job without those guys. And it wasn't because four-man rushes, because they had to be more creative and aggressive, and that better continue, because it just puts your prime guys in better spots, I think. And I know it leaves the secondary vulnerable, but the secondary held up. And I also think it goes back to the quarterbacks that this team is facing. They're going to be facing lesser quarterbacks. Take advantage of some of that. And so I think if they do that, I think that not only can Sweat have a big year, but then you are looking at a top 10 defense. Antonio Gibson, could he get to 1,200 yards rushing?
Ooh, I don't think he's going to get as many carries as he got a year ago, or at least I think the plan is not to have him get that many carries. I will say, and you noticed this too during OTAs, he's really reshaped his body. I mean, he looks great. He really looks locked in, again, like not unlike what you say about Sweat and Holcomb. It's a big year for him too. I mean, he's quickly coming up on a contract situation too. So he's going to have to continue to progress. I think they did the right thing by drafting a running back that I think they intend to play behind him, especially in short yardage situations, hopefully as someone who they'll rely upon to take a series away from Gibson, to give him a rest. I thought way too much of the load was put on Gibson a year ago. I do think with Curtis Samuel back, hopefully healthy, that there's an opportunity to use some of that position versatility that Gibson showcased in college that I know they've talked about using for a couple of years. So I don't think so, to answer your question. Like, I think that's a big number. And I think if all goes to plan, he won't get enough carries to get to that. Not that he won't have a good, rush average or have a really effective year, but that's a big number to get to if you're going to split more time with people.
And what I'd like to see more so than the yards is the yards per carry. That's where I want to see, because one thing that he has worked on it last offseason too, but again, this offseason, but he combined that with reshaping his body, lost a little bit of weight, less body fat. He felt like, and the coaches felt he was more explosive in the spring. There's a lot, with Robinson coming in, you think that, it does not lessen their enthusiasm for what they saw out of Gibson this spring from a potential explosive standpoint. And that's what I'm curious to see. As much as anything, he may not get to 1,200. I think that'd be a great year for him, because you do have that other back and you are going to throw the ball more. I think that's going to be dependent on, you're going to have Curtis Samuel healthy, Logan Thomas and J.D. McKissick and Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and the occasional De'Ami Brown or Cam Sim sighting. So there's a lot of pass talent there. Will he get those chances? But I guess my thing with I am expecting a really good year for him.
Yeah. Here's one I could give you that I think is an expectation for him. And just looking at just kind of the landscape and thinking about the landscape of the NFC, I think he could be a Pro Bowler. Like, I think you're right. I think that could definitively happen for him this year. If Zeke isn't going to be Zeke and Philadelphia is going to switch up running backs and Hurts is going to be running the ball a ton and Saquon's not Saquon, well, name the running backs in the NFC that are like big time standout outside of Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones. Kamara is going to get suspended. So he's not going to be a Pro Bowler this year. Right? Like, San Francisco uses 50 running backs. Seattle's going to have a bad offense. The Rams are a pass first team, really. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of room here. And Leonard Fournette apparently is 260 pounds. So, I would say this for Gibson, if he has a really good year, I'll be the first, like we did midseason last year with Allen, where I went, I hope the world starts taking notice. This guy's a Pro Bowl running back. And I think that's a possibility for him.
Right. I agree with that. Last one, expectation for Jahan Dotson. I don't even know what a number I would put on there. We're looking at 750 yards, or is that too much, too little? What do you think?
I think he's going to play a prominent role. You know what I think will be interesting after seeing him in the spring, and it's the word is out how smooth he is. I'll never forget this, and I thought it was like one of the smartest things that Jay Gruden did as head coach. When they drafted Terry McLaurin, it was so obvious to them in practice that like he totally got it from day one that they didn't play him in the preseason. And I remember sitting there going, oh my God, like they know. Right. And the first game against Philadelphia, it was like, surprise, this guy's a stud. And he had an incredible first game. And then, the secret's out at that point. There's this part of me that feels like, don't show anybody what Jahan's doing, because why show people what he's doing? So I'm not optimistic about him. That said, at the same time, new quarterback, new offense, new everything. The idea of hiding him feels a little.
He's also a first-round pick. It's hard to hide a first-round pick.
I agree, but like I do feel like, what's the point of showing it? I saw enough in the OTAs and have seen enough in general to go, this guy looks like he's got the goods. So, I couldn't put a number on it.
Right. And I would just say, I think he's going to have a good year, because based on what we saw, based on what you see in college, I think there's a savviness to his game and there's a maturity to his game, in addition to his ability to make big catches. He plays bigger. And I only got about a minute. So like with Carson Wentz, you need guys who play bigger. He does. And, he's not a big guy, but he plays bigger than his size. Yeah. And that will help. And I think he's going to take some pressure off McLaurin. You watched some of those games last year, seeing two guys run at him or slide to him, et cetera. So I think he's going to be a big help and turn out to be a good pick. But Bram, that's all we got. I can't wait to get started and look forward to seeing you out in Ashburn on some of those 90-degree mornings. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. I'll see you next week.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with another episode on Monday as we get even closer to training camp. Talk to you next time.